So this microphone is for the internet, not for you guys. All right.
I call this meeting of the Seaside Planning Commission to order. This is a work session, and we will be turning it over to the Planning Director, Jeff Flory.
Thanks, Robin. Tonight, we're presenting on the status of our comprehensive plan, as well as a kickoff meeting for some housing code updates that we've received some grant money for, and 3J is also going to take care of that for us. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Scott with 3J, and he'll run us through our comp plan and where we're at.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And Jeff, actually, frankly, anyone here, I'd like to have this be a conversation. So please interrupt, raise your hand, not my hand. And Jeff, you've seen this, you've been around this, Robin, you as well. If I miss something or something that comes up that sparks a thought, I'd love to have everyone's comments. So we'll go through this presentation. It's actually quite exciting that we're at this point. It's been 2 years now in the making to get to the point where we are. We have the draft comp plan, which is excellent. It's probably 95% there, I'd hope to say. So we're getting really close to the point where we're getting into adoption of the comp plan. And I'll talk a little bit about that schedule. But I kind of view this as our first step in formally adopting a comp plan for Seaside. So it's pretty exciting that we made it this far.
Real quick, Scott,
yeah.
Just so the commission knows and that you know, we do have volume that's being broadcast out, even though it's not working on our speakers in here. So use your microphones so the folks at home can hear what we got going on.
Thank you.
Great. And let's see if I can get this to work. Nope, it's not working. You might have to just do it for me. So the presentation tonight, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the comp plan and recap, kind of how we got there, particularly the public involvement, because that was a big part and a big effort, and then go through the formatting and how the comp plan works, and then talk a little bit about the mapping updates we did, because that's another big step, and then how you can help us review the plan, which I know you've already had gotten to take a look at that, and then adoption and next steps. So we'll talk about that. And then the next one, please. You can go again. So basically, every city in Oregon has to have a comprehensive plan. Now, some cities update these more often than others. We're talking, I think, before the meeting a little about periodic review and needing to update comp plans, but yours is from 1993. I believe it was updated since then, but it's been a while, and you've done some piecemeal updates. In this effort, we really looking at all of the land use planning goals. There's 19 Oregon statewide planning goals that are included in the plan, and it really tries to provide a vision. So it's a guiding document for the city and how the city will grow over the next 5, 10, 15, even 20 years. And those statewide goals are achieved through doing this comprehensive plan process. Just a little bit about the process itself. We started with a background report. So it's kind of like taking inventory of what the city has, where we are now, and we developed a vision. The vision statement is kind of the guiding principles for the comp plan. So you'll notice at the very beginning of the plan, we lay out the vision for the growth of the city. And then the next one, we then draft goals and policies, those goals and an action plan. And so those are the pieces that actually have some teeth in terms of making rules for the city about how they grow. So you'll notice plans really focused around those goals and policies. So the comprehensive plan that we've drafted has that vision. It includes all the information. The background reports are essentially that introduction to each of the chapters of that background report piece, then those goals and policies, as well as that land use map that we've developed. So we did, one of the very first steps was to do a community engagement plan. So figuring out how we wanted to effectively communicate this process with the public. Uh-oh, we lost it. There we go. So we had a project advisory committee that we met 5 times, which was very effective, kind of as our sounding board before we could do public meetings or before we release things publicly. We would have a committee meeting. All those were recorded and made available publicly. We had a few community events we called, and then we did community conversations where we asked the committee to go out and have those conversations. We had a website with online engagement, and then those 2 large community summits, and I'll go over what those looked like. So our advisory committee met 5 times. The whole goal of that was to comment on work products as the project moved forward. Also, one of the main efforts was kind of to guide and lead the public outreach efforts in terms of recruitment for people, doing those community conversations, and then also act as a liaison between other groups, maybe their groups. We asked them to host those public events. And then hopefully when we get to this adoption process, our committee members will come to planning commission meetings, potentially when we get to adoption, and council meetings to say, hey, I was involved with that committee and I think we should move forward with this plan and I support it because I was part of the development and committee. We did a community survey, online survey at the very beginning where we asked lots of different questions. I think the next slide shows how we did some word clouds on things. We asked questions like, what makes Seaside special today? What should we strive to preserve or enhance? Why did you choose to live, work, visit, or vacation in Seaside? And these questions were all tailored to kind of help us do that first thing, which was the vision statement. So these were generally things. We got 435 responses, which is pretty good for that survey. I'll just touch on a few of the topics, but housing, of course, was something that came up a lot. We addressed that in the plan a lot. Beach access, small town feel, walkable community, embracing history, estuary conservation. The interesting thing that I thought about the main topics, you could literally put these within the 19 statewide goals if you wanted to organize them that way. So that's kind of neat that the community was thinking about, subconsciously thinking about those goals and how they would work for Seaside. So these community conversations we had, we just asked, basically our committee members went out and met with specific groups and we handed them a packet, which is a packet of information on questions to ask and information. And these are the groups that we tried to reach out to talk to. I don't think we had all of them, but we did a pretty dang good job at going and doing those community conversations. So I thought that was a successful way to try and develop the vision and get the word out that we're doing a comprehensive plan update. We had 2 of these community summits. This one was at the convention center. We had very good turnout. We had maps on tables. We had some activities. I think the next slide has we did instant polling, which was pretty cool. So we were able to ask live questions and then get everyone's input at once. And so again, we have all these reports. If you're interested in looking at the results for any of this stuff, we have all the results from this. But the instant polling was great. And then I think the next slide shows the recap. So we had about 70 people there, which was great. We went over a project presentation. We did that live polling. We had everyone review the draft vision statement, and then they worked in small groups to kind of help us refine that vision. And then people stood up at the end and kind of gave a little summary of what we talked about at the table. We also had that big microphone that you could throw around at the time. It was a big blue microphone, and that was a fun thing that you have at the convention center. And then the second one we did at Times Theater, which we did a different kind of instant polling. It was called Slido, but this was such a cool event because people really kind of got into it, and I felt like a game show host up there, asking questions and everyone, and I think that a couple beers, that allows people to kind of loosen up a little bit.
Started opening up about halfway through.
Yeah, and then it was interesting too. So we had this comment form there available, and some people filled it out. It was really interesting because you could see the results of these people's answers just come up on the screen. So it's really neat that people were able to type that out, and I thought that went really good. I think the next slide just shows some of the questions. We asked things like about community engagement, equity, historic resources, land use and urbanization, economic development, employment. So you'll notice that these questions we asked really relate to those chapters in the plan. And then basically we wanted to ask about the goals, because at this time we were beyond the vision. We had the vision statement, and we were coming up with goals and policies. So we asked things like, how do you make our transportation system more connected for all modes? And people would type in their answer. So it was pretty cool. And then we had 16 questions. I won't read them all, but again, they run the gamut from things like housing to transportation, parks and recreation, natural hazards, energy, coastal resources. So the idea was, again, that these 16 questions were supposed to cover all the topics that we're going to talk about in the plan. So I thought it was cool. I would love to do that type of meeting again. I would recommend that maybe some of these other planning efforts where we do public outreach, we utilize the same technology. And I just thought it was a fun meeting. So any thoughts or questions about that public involvement? I think, we did put a lot of effort into that. There is one, I'll get to this, but we're going to do another final kind of survey on the draft plan to do a kind of a final wrap up of public involvement before we get into adoption, or as we get into adoption. So, but it seemed to be very, very well taken. So the next one is the comprehensive plan. So I wanted to just touch on those 19 statewide planning goals. Now, interestingly enough, there's some that don't apply to every city. So, for example, we don't have to deal with Goal 15, which is the Willamette River Greenway, because we don't have the Willamette River Greenway here. And then in some other cities, when I worked in Redmond and update their comp plan, for example, we didn't have beaches and dunes or coastal shorelands. So just because there's 19 goals doesn't mean you have to address them all in your comp plan. It's tailored specific to each city. The other thing I'd say is that some comp plans are organized chapter by goal. We didn't do that, and I'll talk a little bit about why we didn't do that, but I think the format worked really well. But again, we start with a vision statement, and I think the neat thing we did here is we had, discussing how we created the vision, and then how that leads into the development of the comprehensive plan. But there was kind of 6 topic areas that the vision touched on that came out of the public outreach, and that was housing, strong economy, nature in the city, inclusive neighborhoods, accessibility and safety, and history and culture. So there's a vision statement about each of those, and again, these are kind of overarching points, touch points that guide the plan as the vision document. And then we have 10 chapters. We have community engagement and equity, community services and historic resources, land use, urbanization, transportation, public facilities, infrastructure, economic development, employment, housing, parks and rec, natural resources, the environment, and the coastal resources preservation. So those 19 goals, at least the ones that pertain to Seaside, are all kind of collapsed within those 10 chapters.
Question for you.
Yes, please.
The order that these are in, were they chosen for a specific reason? What's the thought behind that specific order? Just curious.
So it does kind of follow the 19 goals. So, for example, goal 1 is community engagement. So that's our first chapter. And then goals 18, 19, the last goals are coastal resource preservation. So they do attempt to reflect the same order of the statewide planning goals. They don't do it perfectly, but that was the idea that's why they became in the order they are.
And then these are the 10 out of that 19 that apply to.
Well, actually, there's some of these chapters have multiple goals within them. So I'll show you how that works, but that's a really good question. And I made a point in the plan to identify at the very beginning of each chapter what goals that chapter pertains to. But yeah, no, that's a great question.
Scott,
Yes, please.
Just to piggyback on that, I really like that flow, the way it is structured. I'm just putting it out there. I really do. It has a great flow because it introduces everybody. It groups the human element of it, and then you get into what we need to have as far as a society, and I just really like the way it flows.
Yeah, I was very happy with it too. I think, like I said, the easiest thing to do would be to make a chapter for each of the goals that pertain, but the other thing is there's overlap between goals. You can cover a goal in one chapter or 2 chapters, frankly. So you'll see that as well. So I want to use the land use and urbanization chapter kind of just as an example, but every chapter has the same outline. So they're all set up to have an introduction, which again is a lot of that background information about what Seaside is today. And then We also talk about future, so maybe there's a forecast or future need that's discussed as part of that. Then the kind of the meat of each chapters is the goal statement and the policies. And as a planner and as a planning commission, the goals and policies are really what guide your decisions. So you'll notice, like, when Jeff comes to you with a staff report, someone's proposing a new mixed-use building downtown, let's say, and they might need a conditional use permit for X, Y, and Z. So he'll write a staff report, but a lot of the times you have to have findings. There's findings and recommendations in that staff report. And as planners, we look at the goals and policies in the comp plan, as long as your plan's still relevant and not 20 years old, to make those arguments to help planning commissions and city councils make decisions. So this really should guide decision-making at a government level. So I have a kind of a clip of each of the goal statements from each of the chapters. I don't think we'll spend the time going through each of them, but I want to show you how they work. So every chapter has a set of goals and policies. And so we make a goal statement like conduct meaningful community engagement through collaborative and inclusive process in the implementation of the Seaside Comp Plan and future planning and policy decisions. So that's our goal. And actually, that's kind of a state requirement. It is a state requirement. Part of all planning processes, you have to do public outreach. And frankly, it's probably a third to half of the effort we do as planners when we're doing planning process. It's a really big deal. So that's why goal 1 is community engagement. So then once you have the goal statement, then we have policies that back up that statement. So what are we going to actually do as a city to make sure that we do have meaningful engagement through collaborative processes, right? So one example would be residents and property owners shall have the opportunity to be involved in all phases of the planning efforts of the city, including collection of data and the development of policies. So it's a statement on how we make sure we do that. Engage youth in civic activities through canvassing, fostering a sense of community involvement, responsibility, and leadership among young residents. So a couple good examples. And then the next one, I believe, is community service and historic resources. Very similar. The other thing I wanted to point out is we have little icons. So the idea was we had a colored icon so that when going through the chapters, you kind of have a visual representation of where we are. And I think in the version you got there, we still may have a couple of those that need some updates or not. So if we're missing an icon or the icon's used double, we're working on making sure that all gets refined. But I thought that was kind of a neat thing to do is there's a kind of a color scheme and an icon for each chapter. But again, this is the community service and historic resource example. This is land use and urbanization. So I like this one just because it's land use and we're planners and a planning commission. But so we have to goal statement 1, manage growth through cooperative efforts between the city of Seaside and Clatsop County to provide residents with high quality of life, promote urban development, encourage the efficient delivery of services, and preserve adjacent agriculture and coastal lands. Now that's a mouthful. That's a lot of things to do in one goal. So we have multiple policies. And you'll notice some of the policies in the plan, you might just have one under the goal, but sometimes there's 3, 4, 5, or 6. So depending on the goal, you would have relevant policies that go with that.
Scott, real quick, and some of these things, specifically in this specific goal statement, it says preserve agricultural and coastal lands.
Yeah.
That's language taken straight out of Oregon state law. So some of that stuff we have to have into our plan, and we can't really make a lot of changes. Now we can change the policies on how to achieve that, but the goal statement itself, per Oregon state law, there's things that are mandated that we hold on to.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Jeff. So, and I think that'll come up again when I ask you to do your review. We'll happily take comments on some things. There may be some policies and goals in there that we're just kind of required to have, particularly in the coastal chapters. The estuary protection stuff, there's a whole set of state rules that outline estuary and protection and how it's done in a comprehensive plan. And it's actually going to end up being one of the larger chapters, you'll notice, the coastal chapters, because of all those requirements.
And so question then.
Yes.
As we're going through that,
Yeah.
are there, because I haven't been able to go through the whole
Sure.
slide deck that we got.
Yeah.
As we go through there, are there sections that demarcate not changeable, required, Or are we going to have to go through and say, hey, is this required? Is this required? Is this required?
No, they don't. That's a really good point. I don't identify what's required and what's not. But if you have a question or a comment about that, you could put it in there and say, this seems odd. Is this required? That'd be a fine comment for me to take from you. And then frankly, if it is required, then you're going to see it left in there. And if not, we'd consider removing it or changing it based on whatever comment.
I was just thinking for efficiency purposes.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea.
And some of the things that are required, the policy on how we get to that requirement is flexible.
Yeah.
So if you have a better idea on how to achieve that goal statement through policy, that's where we want your ideas in there, because you may have a way to achieve that goal statement that's not on paper yet.
Totally.
And maybe it should be there. Maybe it's specific to Seaside, a specific Seaside way of getting to that goal that we want to look at and want to potentially implement.
Sure. Remove all red tape. Let us do what we want.
Exactly.
There's your policy.
And, remember too, in this whole scenario, this has to be recommended by the Planning Commission and then adopted by the City Council and then acknowledged by the Department of Land Conservation and Development. So, yeah, we can put whatever we want in there, but they may not acknowledge it at the end of the day. So we want to make sure we're following those required goals as closely as possible.
Yeah, and I would say too, I don't want you to feel like this onus or pressure to make sure that it's not your responsibility to make this perfect, but what we want you to do is make sure that you support it and understand it, so that when we do get to council, you can say, yeah, we went through this and we asked, Scott and Jeff and these questions, and we were able to, give our input, because there might be some stuff you find in here that we probably should change, and that's okay too. So I guess we can just click through the next. I think there's transportation. This is one where we didn't quite finish the icon, but it might be finished now. Economic development, employment, public facilities and infrastructure. Again, these are chapters, just examples of the goal statements. Parks and Rec, natural resources and environment again, and coastal resources and preservation. So that's the last one. Any other questions or thoughts on kind of the format of the plan, how the goals and policies work? It should be pretty straightforward. And again, I'll get to this when we talk about the review, but I would recommend really focusing on the goals and policies when you're doing your review, because that background information stuff, it is there, some of the future forecasting and whatnot, it is what it is. So another thing that I'm a geographer, my background's geography, and so I'm a map nerd. So we ran into a problem here when we first started, and one of the neatest things I think you're going to get out of this, in my opinion, I love the plan part too, but I love me a good map. So we've updated your comprehensive plan map, your zoning map, your urban growth boundary, your city limits. We first jumped in here, we realized that, oh my goodness, we have 3 different versions of your city limits. So the state has one, the county has one, the city has one. So one of the main goals was to figure out how are we going to update your city limits and actually we can't just change the line. It has to be based on an ordinance. So that was one. The next thing we looked at, I think, is your zoning files. So again, there was a whole bunch of different zoning layers, and I think Jeff was using a paper map on his wall, and there was another PDF version that was old, and the county had a different version on their GIS system. So it was one of these things that was really important to do, was to make sure that some of it was just cleanup. I think the next ones show kind of some examples, but for example, these were some of the old versions of the map, and so this would be a PD that was placed. So, but maybe the zoning map was never updated; it wasn't reflected on that. So we were able to do that. And the next one I think is another good example of just, this is A2, A1, what is it, right? What was the actual zoning on that? It's aquatic zone, so it's not a development zone, but what is it? Is it A1 or A2? So we went through and we updated all those maps. One of the neat things we were able to do is that we do these things, the city does, as planners we do. We have to notify the state when any ordinance is done from a land use perspective. It's called a POP, or Post-Acknowledgement Plan Amendment. And so we notify the state, and it's kind of a pain in the butt, but it's something we do, and because the state needs to keep track of all this stuff. But the neat thing was, as we were starting this, they had just started to digitize all of their records. So they were really able to help us with the UGB alignment and the city limit alignment based on actual ordinances that the city had notified the state. So that we didn't have to go back and justify where the line was. We just looked at old ordinances and said, oh, well, the map just wasn't updated when this ordinance was adopted to do this annexation or whatever it may be. What's the next slide here? So this is your map. It's pretty cool. So this, I want to point out something that's really important. This is both your comprehensive plan map and your zoning map. So this is new. A lot of cities have two maps. They'll have a comp plan map, which is kind of your future land use map, and then you have a zoning map. And the tricky part with that is, and not that this is a wrong system, I mean, the majority of cities in the state actually have a two-map system, is that oftentimes zoning changes will happen, but then the comp plan map isn't updated or vice versa. The comp plan map is changed in the zoning, and ideally, your comp plan designations are similar to your zones. So the whole goal here is that we now have a cleaned up urban growth boundary, we now have a cleaned up city limits, we now have a zoning map that we can rely on that's now going to be both your comprehensive plan map and your zoning map. So I think this was something we accomplished. The state helped kick in some grant money to help us get this done. It was months of work. I want to say we did this for 8 months or more, just working on this map.
There's a lot of meetings.
A lot of meetings.
Interestingly enough, though, when we kicked off this project, I was going through our public library and the materials that they had there. And the public library had a plan from 1979 that was the start of our original comprehensive plan. And in that plan that was adopted by the city council was a comprehensive plan and zoning map. It's a one map system.
There you
from
go.
1979, which that it's hanging on my wall in my office. If you guys are in there, you'll see it. And which was kind of unique because that was the only time that I had ever seen a comprehensive plan map because we've never had one.
Yeah.
Debbie, you've been in the office for a long time and there's never been two maps. It's always been one map. We can never figure out why, but that original map from 1979 says comprehensive plan and zoning map.
Yeah. So it's a good way to do it. I think I mentioned I did it Redmond's comp plan, and they did the same thing. They went with a one map system. So not unheard of. I think hopefully it'll serve you well, and it's something. The neat part too is that the county and the state were in on this and have acknowledged that have agreed on the boundaries and the designations and all this stuff. So right now this map is not adopted. So this is not a map that you can legally use when a permit comes in yet. But the neat thing is once the comp plan gets adopted, you'll also have this map adopted. So you're essentially doing a zoning update too. So that's something I got to remember when we do go to adoption is that may be a separate ordinance beyond the comp plan is adopting an actual zoning map as well. So that just occurred to me.
If during that adoption phase, if a current zone changes to something else, how is that dealt with? Just everything that's there existing is grandfathered in, or?
Yeah, so the thing about this is we actually didn't change any zoning. So you won't actually, what had happened was the map had just not been updated.
Got it.
So the zoning, the ordinances are there, so that didn't change. So that's a really good question because we would have to do Measure 56 noticing if we did. That would be a bigger deal. But luckily, we didn't actually change one parcel from one type to a different type. So it's more of just a cleanup and an acknowledgement that everyone agrees that this is the correct data now.
That takes a little bit of pressure off, to be honest with
Well,
you.
and that's for this project, but to take your question further, maybe we will ask Jeff in another meeting because, yeah, let's say we do a zone change
Yep.
at XYZ property, are the surrounding parcels grandfathered under the existing zoning?
So to do a zone change, it's an ordinance. It's an ordinance through the city council that's adopted by the state. Starts at the planning commission though with a recommendation. So if, for example, if a property owner looks at this map and says, no, my zoning's supposed to be X and you have it listed as Y. Okay, now we need to go dig through ordinances and find the ordinance where that zone change occurred. and we'll have it here. Kim will have it, and the state will have a copy, should have a copy through the pop-up process. If that's the case, then it's a simple ordinance cleanup where we will go through the whole process of a zone change, similar to what you have seen as the commission before, all the way up through the council with the notation that this was the original ordinance that was adopted. We've adopted a new map. Does the council want to honor the old zoning that was changed before and make that change? Everything in this should be supported by ordinance already.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where DLCD coming through with their digitization process really helped us, because all of those paper files became organized and digital to where DLCD could go through and say, yeah, this is the acknowledged mapping that we have, which now we can update that with 3J, putting it into a GIS system where we can control that and make sure those updates happen. And those shape files will be shared with the county, so it'll be on the county's web maps as well
Okay.
with their GIS department.
And
So finding the 1979 dual map and what we have here is a quote unquote finished product, essentially.
Yeah.
There were no big surprises or big changes other than, oh, hey, this should be tweaked here. And
so that one example was like there was a planned unit development that was approved, but it was never mapped. So the base zone stayed the same, but so exactly that. So it's basically cleaned up. But this is like the perfect segue to my next topic, which I'm going to talk about tonight, which is the zoning update. That's exactly what we're going to do with the middle housing zone. Is we're going to look at making some changes to your zoning code to allow different housing types. So that would be a different process, though. That would be a totally different process than a comp plan. But that will be an ordinance. So we're going to work together on this housing ordinance, which is the next topic. And you'll I don't know if we need to bring it up now, but
I'm just checking for.
attendee. Okay.
We have a commissioner via
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Zoom. I'm going to bring
Sure.
him in really quick.
But yeah, I think that. Yeah, well, we'll talk about it more during my second short presentation. But I think that it'll help you. It'll help us all understand, that kind of zone change. And we may end up doing noticing. You only have to do the Measure 56 notice if you're down zoning, if you're taking away someone's ability to do something. If you're allowing more things, then you don't have to do a notice everyone. So
Commissioner Mitchell, are you there? Can you hear us? Let's test your audio really quick.
Yes, I can hear you.
microphone's going.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, but it's not coming.
Oh, because
through.
our
The
speakers.
speakers aren't working.
Shoot. He
Yeah.
can type in the chat if he wants.
Yeah, that might be your only way to ask questions is to type in the chat.
And we'll read it out loud if they come in.
Okay.
Okay. So anyway, again, I love maps. I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. We can print as big as small as we want now that we have all the GIS updated. So it's all digital. The next one. So I think we can go to the next one. But this one I just want to talk about I mentioned doing one more survey. We still got that in the works. I wanted to get the plan to you all in draft format before I gave it to the public, just because I thought that'd be nice. So the idea again is we're going to have another Seaside survey where I want to ask like a question or two about each of the plan chapters. So if you go to the next slide, I think I recently did this. I'm helping Manzanita do their comp plan update as well, and we did a public meeting specific to goals, the beach and the beach resources and beach dunes goals 18 and 19, and I want to basically show the policies in the plan. So they'll be able to read the policies in that chapter, and then we can ask 2 simple questions on each chapter. So it'll probably be 20 questions. It'll be, what's currently working under this goal, what's not, or, what needs improvement or attention. So I think it's going to be a pretty general survey, but that's the whole idea, and we'll get that up in the next week or so that we can kind of release the draft plan publicly and then have a way to get more public feedback. So any thoughts or recommendations on that piece? Does that sound like a good way to do it? We originally had we talked about doing another summit, but I wasn't quite sure how to, once we had the plan done, I didn't want to go back out and say, well, what do you think? And open it back up, when we have a draft plan. So I thought this might be a better way to have them specifically react to the draft plan and policies within it. So
And how is that going to be executed?
we haven't done it yet. So the idea is that we're going to probably use social media and the city website, and then it'll be usually I like to use SurveyMonkey just because it's a quick tool, and we'll set up the questions and policies and send that out. And so it'll essentially be a web link that we can email, we can put on social media, we can put on the website, and then also have a link to be able to look at and download the plan itself. So
At those, the summits that we had, at the convention center at the times, were email addresses gathered at that time?
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Thank you. See, that's why I asked the question. Brilliant. So I think we should utilize that mailing list that we've developed through this process.
Because
And
they're already
send that link and send the draft plan and say, hey, thank you for being at these events. You helped us develop this plan. Awesome. Yes, that's why I asked the question.
I like the side-by-side comparison where you can read it and then comment next to it. I do that a lot.
Okay.
Just what I do for a living.
Okay.
Where it's side by side. Here it is. Here's the update, or here it is. Let's make comments. It makes it easy to go step by step. So
Okay.
for me, that's a great.
Yeah, and I was thinking, how like on the surveys you click, like we'll have it organized by chapter, so then once you're done with those policies and the comments on that one, you can click next. And people might not have comments on every single one, but that's fine. They can just click to the next chapter. So awesome. The next thing we did is we called it a technical advisory committee, but really it included city staff, county staff, and DLCD. They've been sent the draft plan. I think you might have heard me mention this, but we did receive feedback from a lot of these folks already. I have to tell you, all of their comments have not been incorporated into the current draft that you have. So again, we will be going through another round of draft edits based on the input we got from the technical advisory folks as well as yourself. So I think the next slide just talks about DLCD. Yeah, particularly the coastal chapters, because they have staff there. I'm a city planner. I'm not a coastal expert. So I really rely on those coastal experts to be able to help us with those chapters. So that'll be great. So in terms of plan adoption, our next step, this is kind of our timeline. The Planning Commission and council meetings, I think, this probably is more aggressive than we're really going to get to. I don't know, Jeff, you think adoption February is probably too aggressive, but if we have another work session, this is kind of our November work session, maybe we have another work session, or what we may actually end up doing two public hearing and keeping that public hearing open for a month. We actually have to do a public hearing for you to make a formal recommendation to send it to council. So at some point, we're going to have to get beyond the work session and kind of get down to brass tacks and have you guys really make a recommendation. And that will include a formal public hearing with noticing and whatnot.
Which with DLCD and state law, we've got to put out the PAPA notice, 35 days in advance.
Yeah.
So a public hearing at the earliest could happen in January.
So, and December, nothing happens in December. So we'll probably end up skipping December, just being honest with you all, and we'll move into January, February, March, and potentially even April for council to do that. Because they're going to do I think they're required to do two public hearings, right?
Our council requires 3 readings.
3 readings, okay.
And it can be done in 2 meetings, something like this. I doubt they'll do in 2 meetings. They'll want 3.
So we'll do 3 meetings.
and
Yeah,
rightfully
106
so.
pages,
Yeah.
they're going to
Yeah.
take a little bit more time.
So again, probably more aggressive than reality, but we'll be into early next spring until hopefully we get through adoption of the comp plan.
That's great.
Yep. And then how can you help? Review the chapters. I mentioned this, focus on policies, provide feedback by commenting. We're going to send a review link. I'm hoping to get it out tomorrow. If I don't, I promise it'll be this week, but it'll be just to the planning commissioners. And the reason I'm doing it this way is because rather than have you all mark up a plan, I figured I'd organize it kind of like a survey where you go through and then we'll have you can comment on each of the policies or whatever, or skip it. So we'll just make it a way to collect it all in one spot rather than taking comments on the plan. So feel free to do that. The other thing that you could do is, if that's not the best way, you can always take notes and send me an email. We'll be flexible, but trying to be organized as we can to get you a link to help with that review process. And it's not a huge rush. I think we'll probably give you a few weeks to do that, especially since we're not likely going to meet in December. Probably even more than a few weeks to do that review process. So, yeah, so that's kind of what we want you to do as part of the Planning Commission review. Because I'd like to get to the point where I've incorporated all of your comments before we get to that public hearing where we're making a recommendation. So we'll have another draft based on the Technical Advisory Committee and then the Planning Commission's comments. We'll do another cleanup draft, and then we'll do those public hearings.
Will you have a due by date then on there?
Yeah, I'll do that. That's a good, I will. That way you can make sure that you get some sort of deadline. I appreciate it. All right. Yeah, I think I just had, review those policies. Oh, the other thing that I've done, and I don't think you're going to utilize this, but what I've done and I will continue to do is, and I mostly do this for DLCDs, and also once we get to adoption, it's nice to know what the goals were and then what we're proposing. So I actually have a spreadsheet that I'm logging all of this in, so that we can go and say, well, this is what your current plan says, and these are your new policies. And there's a direct comparison to be able to review. The state really likes that, and I know that a lot of times electeds really like that too. So they can say, well, how different is this in our current stuff?
And as you can see, it's drastically different.
Yeah.
Organization and layout, it is completely different
Yeah.
plan.
It
That's
is.
why this is a whole new comprehensive plan.
It's a brand new thing. We basically started from scratch. So that's just another tool we're using. And if you want this, we can share this with you. That's not a problem.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So next steps, I'm going to update the plan again based on your input and the technical folks. We're going to do that community survey. We'll do your public hearings, as I mentioned. We'll probably do a city council work session, then city council public hearing. So that's what's going to take us into spring, is those next steps. And I think that's it for that presentation.
awesome.
Any questions, thoughts? You will hopefully have a new comp plan to use when you're making all of your land use decisions as a commission now.
Well, I say thank you for all your hard work and input, both of you.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. It's
It's the Bible, it's the Bible.
in my opinion. So, good. Oh, good, Rogers.
Oh, what does Roger say?
He can hear us, so that's good.
Wonderful.
He'll have to type in the chat if he wants to tell us anything, unfortunately, because we can't get the speakers to work.
Any questions, anybody?
Any other thoughts before I get on the other one? Okay. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the idea tonight, is you wanted to have a discussion, but it's probably better to just really go dive into that plan, start reviewing it, and let us know what you think.
Really didn't expect you guys to digest that entire 117-page plan over just one weekend. So there's a lot there. There's a lot to look at before you want to start having discussions on it.
Next meeting, I will have a quiz, so bring your number 2 pencil. I'm just joking.
It's a robust document, I'm going to tell you that.
I'll cheat off of you.
So,
I put that word out there.
well, good. Okay. So this is a really short presentation, but this this is a grant that the city received in 2024, I believe. So it's that DLCD gave the city to look at doing middle housing code updates. So, and you're right on the cusp of 10,000, right? Or do you break 10,000 already?
No, we're at 7,300.
7,300, okay.
Got a little ways to go.
So this is kind of being proactive because a lot of these middle housing rules at the state level don't kick in until you're about 10,000 population-wise. But there are some things that you are required to do that your code is not currently in compliance with anyway. So that's this whole project here. So let's jump into that.
Well, and also,
Yeah,
since you guys are going to take a deep dive into this,
yeah,
yes, this is going to get us closer to being compliant with state law. No, we're not going to probably get there because the laws keep changing before we can adopt.
Yep.
So the goal is to get us as close as we can, and then as rulemaking happens at the state level, we can come back and make amendments to
We're
this.
catching up.
Yeah, just get us caught up and get us in a good spot.
Yep.
And then let's work on keeping caught up after that.
And I will say that that is not abnormal. You know, I did a very similar project to this in Warrenton, their middle housing update. I did in Newburgh. I did something very similar grant, and they're in the same situation you are in terms of getting there. I also think that it's kind of like the low-hanging fruit to allow for more housing, which you all need. So, but yeah, the whole idea is to kind of address part of your housing need. Expand the opportunity for middle housing. Middle housing, you probably know what it is, but it's basically the way they define it is duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, multifamily, some multifamily housing, and what am I missing? ADUs, yeah, ADUs. So those are kind of the things that we're looking at, you know, allowing or making more easily done, and then also, again, being in compliance with the ORSs. So there you go. I just tried to memorize it, and I had it on my next slide. Yeah, I think the idea is to kind of remove barriers to development for more housing types. Again, people think, you'll hear, I'm sure you've heard this a lot, but the term affordable versus workforce, there's all these things. We're not really addressing affordability in this, but you do address affordability through housing stock. So if you got more housing, it's going to hopefully help with affordability overall. And also, these types of units tend to be smaller and more dense, which then makes them more affordable, just in their nature of their design. So that's that role. I did this schedule, and it takes us through next summer. We may be able to do it faster. I was probably conservative in the amount of time that I had. I also didn't tell you that as Planning Commission, you are my formal committee. You're my advisory committee. So we decided not to on the comp plan, we had a specific committee that did this.
Steering
committee. But we really only have about 4 meetings for that committee through this process. And I thought that you all you're the ones that are going to have to adopt this and move it forward. And it's kind of fairly technical in terms of the things that we're going to work on. So it made more sense to have the Planning Commission be our steering committee. So you're wearing 2 hats. You're wearing a Planning Commissioner hat and a project committee, steering committee hat as part of this. So I mostly want to point out my colors. There's essentially 4 tasks. What we're going to do is we're going to do communications and outreach. There is a public survey and an online public meeting that we will have, just one of those. And then we're going to basically do a code audit. That'll be my first step. And then we're going to draft the code updates, and then we're going to do a final code update for adoption. So those are the real tasks. But essentially, here's our first meeting in November, Planning Commission meeting. We're going to do stakeholder interviews in the next couple months as part of that scope. So we're going to probably talk to some folks that build this type of housing to try and, that have used your code, that will give us feedback on what works and what doesn't. Because that's always a really good start is, talk to the folks that have to build it. So those stakeholder interviews will happen. We'll come back after we do stakeholder interviews. And at this meeting in February, I want to have my code audit and some concepts done. And the interviews. So that our next meeting, what I'd like to share with you, and probably it might be March, it might be February, but it'll be right in there. I want to share with you the results from those interviews as well as our initial code audit, what we found. Then we'll come back in May with a draft code update. So that'll be, here's our recommended code changes for the middle housing. And then in June, we'll probably have, I was thinking maybe a joint work session where we actually come back with kind of the code update that we're going to recommend for adoption, and then get into adoption next summer. So, but this again will be an ordinance, and it'll be a code change, and it'll mostly target, well, it will target your residential zones. It's not going to, we probably won't even look at your commercial or mixed use zones. It'll be just your residential zones and allowing these middle housing types in those. If you're over 10,000 you have to allow those uses within there. But the neat thing is we can, as we work through this, there's more flexibility for us to make some choices as a commission and as a committee to make sure that it fits for Seaside now. And then once you hit that 10,000 and you're forced to do all those things, you could do that then.
There we go.
But well, as Jeff said, we're moving forward.
Can I
Yes.
ask a question, Jeff? And you probably know this. In that project, does it address manufactured housing as well?
There should be some updates to our manufactured code because it
Okay.
is out of date right now.
Okay,
Okay.
So we need to look at that.
Okay.
And
we'll look at the scope.
Scott and I haven't sat down and gone through the code. That's where the code audit's going to really
Yeah.
reveal what we need to do.
Yeah.
But yes, manufactured dwellings, it has to be part of this because we are out of compliance on our manufactured dwelling code. And it's going to be more removing barriers than adding anything.
Yep.
Right, because it's only allowed in specific zones at this point.
That's really interesting. I'm working on a project in Ashland right now, which is my hometown. Specific to, they propose doing they're trying to protect their RV or their manufactured home parks. And it ends up that none of the landowners really want to buy in on it. I'm going off tangent now, sorry, but I got to tell my story. And so it ended up it's not going to be a zone, but they are doing exactly what Jeff said in terms of relaxing things that are, a lot of these manufactured home codes are so specific, like it has to be a double wide, it has to have a roof pitch of this, and it has to have this setback, and has to have a porch and a deck that's this size. And it's like straight out of the classic 70s double wide, code. It just doesn't make any sense. And these days, manufactured homes sometimes are modular. They come in pieces, and they can be all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and they can be smaller, and they, might not need a porch, and they might not be up off the ground. So anyway, that's a really good point in terms of looking at how we need to be in compliance with the state, and also just frankly, that's a very viable housing type, and it's not, in the past, it's been looked down upon as, cheap or not built well, but these days some of those new homes are really well
like
done.
you said, there's manufactured homes like we always
Yeah,
refer back to, but there are so many different types of modular housing, component housing now that how does it get labeled if it's not made out of
yeah,
fir?
Yeah.
I mean FIR, tree. So yeah, I mean that's a viable option. You stop that.
I didn't think of any.
I'm
other
just
type
saying.
of fur.
I meant
Thank you
tree.
for
I'm
clarifying.
firwood. Anyway, I mean because that it's much more economic for a lot of folks and in small spaces as well.
my mind went to those, I don't know if you've seen those, like 3D printed homes.
Yes.
Where they extrude I was like,
Yeah, exactly. The concrete ones, poured on site.
so, yeah,
So going forward with the housing codes.
yes,
Looking at the slide deck that we received, Seaside's predicted to grow from 7,489 people in 2022 to 8,772 in 2054.
Yeah.
That is a 32-year span,
yeah.
correct, from 2022, and we're only growing by what was it, 1,700 people? Or,
Not a big growth forecast.
Yeah.
That's what Portland State's numbers
Yeah,
on
and that-
their population forecast, but that also doesn't factor in that we've got 300 apartment units in the pipeline right now.
Right, and that's what I was. That's the point behind that is because if we have the 300 units, as we're going into this,
Yeah.
we need to be maybe a little bit more aggressive.
I think that's a good,
So
yeah.
but keep that in mind that
I mean, a higher number for
hi-
the
a
future.
higher number, yeah.
I
'Cause
think-
you keep dropping 10,000,
yeah.
and we have 300 in the pipe right now in 2022. So we're already over, potentially 8,000 people. So I think we're going to reach that way before we hit the
I think you will too.
2-year.
I think, and those PSU, so just, I don't know if you know, but PSU, and I think that's going to change. I think it's going to be DLCD in the future. But Portland State does population forecasts for all jurisdictions in the state. And they do it for a lot of different reasons. They do it for, funding. They do it for housing needs. They do it for a whole bunch of different reasons. And they're never perfect. It's a forecast. It's always a guess. And in most of the cities I work with, they always feel like it's not as aggressive as it should be.
Sure.
But they're also feeling that pressure from day to day as new growth happens. But I agree, you're not going to be, it's not going to be 2050 by the time you hit. It might be, it's probably, I bet you're 10 years away. I'm just guessing. You're probably 10 years away from adding 2,000 people.
Sure. So let's say, and I don't want to get too in the weeds on this, but
Sure.
Let's say that we're already over 8
Yep.
right now, or about to be. Once this gets put together, can we send that info back to PSU or DLCD and say, look, you guys predicted this. Here's the reality. We think our projections, because would that affect any state funding or anything like that, the future state fund or any type of future funding or considerations? I don't want to be too reserved on our numbers and then run into, oh, hey, we didn't expect such a housing boom when we clearly are expecting more of a boom.
The tricky part here, though, too, is you do not have a whole bunch of land that's ready to develop.
Right.
So, but there are sites like the high schools, there's some stuff that you could put a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So that might be scary, but it's true. There's some, you got some areas that could grow. So I don't think their number's that far off.
Sure.
But I think the first point you made is the most important, is that when we're doing these changes, I really would think about that $10,000 population number as something that we should consider, and because I don't think that what they're requiring is that extreme. Frankly, it's really not. So
with how and you may get into this and tell me to shut up at any point.
all right.
With how our codes are currently, and of course how we're looking at them. What is the current maximum population that we can have, and what is our potential highest population?
I don't know that, but what I would do is, how old is your buildable lands inventory? Who knows?
2013 was one, but I thought we just did one with the county.
We did do one with the county.
Yeah.
Which?
Yeah. So I guess what I'm getting
Buildable
at
land
is
study?
there's kind of two factors there. It's like, what's your growth potential, and then what's your capacity? So I do a zoning capacity analysis, which is a whole nother GIS exercise where you look at your buildable lands and you look at the zoning category, and then you make some assumptions about what density would grow on theirs, and you can kind of play out a scenario, just like you have capacity for this X population under your current buildable lands inventory with your current zoning. Now, the cool thing would be to look at it now without making some of these middle housing changes that will allow more density, and say, well, your capacity, frankly, is going to go up once these new code changes are adopted for the middle housing. You're going to create more capacity because you're allowing more density in the single family zones. So I don't know if that helps your.
Well, so when we hit 10,000. The big trigger is that we are required to perform a housing capacity analysis.
Yep.
And then we're also required to put together a housing production strategy to meet those goals. Astoria is going through that right now because they're over 10,000.
Right.
We're not subject to that requirement just yet. In fact, I don't know how many contract planners are available to help do those, because everybody that's over 10,000 has to do that, and they're all trying to get that done.
Well, and interestingly enough, they just put the cities on a schedule to make sure that all the cities now that are over 10,000 are scheduled when they are required to do those updates.
Yep. Okay. So and there's a lot that goes into that too. It's not just buildable land too. We got to be thinking about infrastructure.
Yep.
Do we have water and sewer capacity to handle X amount of units? And I tell you, we don't have a solid answer for that just yet.
Right. Appreciate that. Another question. As we're going through this, what should we as a planning commission keep in mind? What checks and balances are there? So what we don't want to do also, and just thinking through it, is don't want to create more housing and influx of population than there are jobs, because we're extremely seasonal. I know exactly how many people aren't working at my hotels right now. So sustainability wise, great. We get all these people moving here in summer. All these units are filled. We get to the off season and there's no jobs. They're, just at what checks and balances do we have to say, okay, we've reached this level, we need more industry. We reached this level. Is there anything like that, or are we just shooting in the dark?
Not really as part of this process. There
Okay.
isn't. But that, I mean, super good information to have if we could figure it out. But yeah, probably.
It's only half, unfortunately, of the process.
I was going to mention though, and then let's keep going here on to the next one. What's the next slide? I was going to mention something. Oh, I'll get to it on the next one. But what I wanted to say was that one of the things I'll make sure I do as part of this is I will have a list of must-dos and like a can-dos. So that you'll know that these are the code changes that we have to do to be in compliance. And these are some other cool things you might want to consider. So that's kind of how I've done these in the past, and that's really helpful too, because then you know what you can and can't change, and if you have other options to do that. So I already talked about this with the schedule, but we're going to review your existing code, do those interviews, show you the code audit, review with you guys, do that community meeting and online survey. I'm not quite sure what to do on that survey because the public, and we always have to have public input on these things, but this is so specific to middle housing. We'll have to figure out a creative way to try and get input on this. I guess what I'm saying is this is a difficult topic to get people to be interested in, unless you're saying, I'm going to change your zoning on your property, then they'll be at the meeting. So
Yeah, we can shop it around though too, similar how we did the comprehensive plan to
Yeah.
SCDA, Chamber,
Yep.
Lions Club,
Yep.
some of the other community groups, and get that survey pushed out to everybody.
So yeah, we'll hopefully get that done and do it well. Yep, and then I just put a couple of examples in here, and these aren't really to discuss tonight, but these are the types of things that we will be talking about. So right now, your ADUs can't exceed 520 square feet without a conditional use permit. You probably already know that, I don't know, or if you've done one. And they can't exceed, even with a conditional use permit, they can't exceed 800 square feet. Now, a lot of cities I work with, they might allow, so the question would be, do we want to keep that? That's fine. We're going to be we're required to allow ADUs, which you already do, so you're already a step ahead there. But is there a reason why we're limiting them to 525 square feet? Maybe we could make them bigger. Maybe we could allow 800 square feet without a conditional use permit.
Then it's no longer an ADU.
It might not be, and that's exactly the type of thing that I want to talk to you guys about, though.
But that square footage just defines the ADU
Yeah.
in another. So
Well, then the next slide too. I mean, this makes it more complicated, but then there's all these other things. It's not just the size. You have things about where they're located. You can't exceed 1 story. Is there a reason why it can't exceed 2 stories? I don't know. So these are the types of things we'll talk about as an examples. ADUs is one we'll discuss, and then another one. The next one is this comes up to parking a lot. Sometimes I don't know if your code requires off-street parking for ADUs or not.
It does, but it's not enforceable because of state law.
All right, yeah, because technically you can't.
You can't.
Can't.
So, but for example, if someone's putting in, one thing that might be interesting is maybe allowing on-street parking where it meets city safety design and performance standards to count as on-site parking. Because sometimes requiring a parking spot or 2 for a fourplex or something, there's just no room on the lot. And so does it make sense to do this or not? I don't know. That's kind of controversial. Some cities are like, heck no, I don't want to allow my on-street parking to count for someone's off-street parking, but something we can discuss. So just a couple topics to share with things that we'll talk about. So next step, I mentioned this code audit concepts, stakeholder interviews, and then the survey, and we'll do the updates. I think that's it for tonight. Questions, comments, thoughts?
That's great.
So
Thank you.
Should be interesting. Something fun to do, something different than you have to do, something that's different than your regular job duties.
Jeff, with everything changing so rapidly in the housing and state law and whatnot, there's obviously ordinances or state law that we have to adopt as a city. The process, say the state says you must do this, does that automatically get adopted into our ordinances, or do we have to go through a whole process on that?
We still have to go through the process. even though it's a mandatory state law that we're adopting, we still have to go through the process to get it into our code.
Yep.
And I will, so on the staff side of things right now, we're working out a contract to go through all of our city ordinances, all of the ordinances, bring them up to a standard that they should be, and organized in a method that's digital, online version, as you've seen from other cities. So that is a process that's starting right now along with this, and they're going to do every one of our ordinances and make things hopefully easier to find, easier to be able to interpret, and easier to have access for the public. But these housing laws, my goal here, and I've talked with DLCD about this, because they were, are you sure you want to do this grant now, or do you want to wait? Well, I don't want to wait, because the more we wait, the farther behind we get. Let's get us up to standards now, and then we can always go through an update process as the rulemaking things are worked out over the next year and a half with DLCD. And let's not forget, we're getting ready to go into a short session too. So we may see further housing requirements come out of that, which again it's a never-ending cycle right now with the legislature and housing codes. They're not letting us keep up. They keep adding more, and we're not the only city that's behind. We're pretty far behind. It's time to get caught up, and then try to stay caught up once we're at that point.
Why isn't there, just because I've never gone through this process before, why isn't there like an auto adopt? We're required to do it.
Yeah.
So why isn't it, as we're going through this comp plan and doing these ordinances, why can't, is there the ability to do an ordinance that says the city will adopt any blah, blah, blah state law that comes out? I don't know if that's,
I can tell you a lot of the problem is we don't know what's out of compliance until it's pointed out to us.
Yeah, exactly.
So while I know there are things that are out of compliance in our code, every week, every couple of weeks, I'm learning of something else that's out of compliance in our code. And if we don't have, if you've ever sat down and tried to go through the ORS, it's pretty robust. And these codes are all in the ORS. That's why it's important for us to get it into our city code, which is much easier for the public and for city staff and the planning commission and city council to manage. And with an assurance that city code is updated to state law. And that's the goal, is to keep that updated. Every time a new law passes, we should be adopting those changes if we're required to.
Yeah.
Got it. I am not. We don't have as many laws and rules in the hotel industry, obviously, as a state and city dynamic does. With one of my brands that I have, they used to release it up until last year. Twice a year, they would change brand standards, and I have 216 pages of brand standards that just changed. A bunch of it just changed in August. That we're obviously they push it out to us. We're required to, but I do get the whole going through everything line by line, because 3 months from now they're going to say, "Oh, this wasn't such a good idea. Let's change this over here." I get it. I don't envy you, but I understand the process.
Well, the interesting thing too is that if someone came in and wanted to do a project, they could challenge the city's code, and the state law is going to actually trump that.
Right.
So you're going to, they could potentially do something that's allowed under state law, and just because your code says no, they could make it. I mean, they'd have to go through a legal process to do that, which is not fun and cheap, but they could. Another thing is they have a lot of these ordinances, or a lot of these ORSs will have what they call model codes, and if a city or jurisdiction doesn't adopt a code, then they default to that model code. So just another example. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Good example. Yep. So, yeah, that's all I've got for tonight. I'm looking forward to working with you on getting the comp plan across the finish line and doing this for the next several months into next summer. So you don't get rid of me that quick.
That's great.
I think that's it, unless anyone else has any other thoughts or comments.
That's it? And nobody has anything else to say? Nope. Okay, and I presume we lost Roger, right?
He's still there, I think.
Bye, Roger. 'Cause
So-
last time he wasn't here, I totally missed him.
So the next step is we'll receive that survey for you, and
Yep.
then go through policy by policy.
Yep, I'll send you the survey link for the comp plan review, and we're good to there. And you don't have to worry about this project till I come back to you in a few months with some more information for the housing.
Okay, we'll call this work session to the end at 6:09.
All right.
Yay.